Okay, this is episode 19 of OverSight, featuring me, usual host Thorin. Just had a G Fuel earlier, just get my spirits up, get a bit up. I heard you had water, right, Monty? Because I don't know if you're aware of this, but actually, there is actually very small trace amounts of lead allowed in water. Like the EPA actually has a threshold,
Mm-hmm.
It's not the case, actually, that every drink should contain no lead in whatsoever. Like, that's actually not the way it works, believe it or not. I just wanted to put your mind at ease there, in case.
It just depends. It just depends in America, actually, where you're living. There's a difference between where I am and, Flint, Michigan. So.
Yes, you're absolutely right. Yes, apparently it depends on whether your home was constructed before 1986, where they still use certain types of piping. But listen, I come prepared, motherfucker. So you can give me any trivia you want, and we'll run with that. So obviously, speaking of people who come prepared with piping information, Overwatch League Stage 1's finished, hasn't it? So that's done. That's been and gone. And we've got our guest here, Yiska, who apparently exists in some sort of quantum super state where he is and is not a teacher, but exists in Germany. And when the way German law works, basically he needs to see, he's like, when we were trying to ask him if he was a teacher, he was doing that thing of like, now if you're a cop, you have to tell me, right? Like that thing from like the fucking early 90s when you're on the internet. Like, no, we don't, Yiska. So we just wanted to know, mate. We don't actually care whether you are a fucking teacher or not. But here's the thing. You play a teacher. You do a very good job of it. I've noticed you're very I'd say sort of didactic in the way that you approach things, You seem to try and break things down, make a lot of illusions that, quite frankly, the audience doesn't appreciate, I can relate to that in my own way. A lot of mine tend to be more from the 1980s pop trivia that each one life for.
Right people understand the illusions. The right people understand the illusions, right? As long as the proper person gets it, that's the most important thing.
Plus, the secret to that actually is people don't have to get what you're alluding to, but if you make it really good, first of all, they aspire to, because they know secret. Oh, that sounds good. And then it's a bit like rap lyrics. Like, I think most people don't get a lot of rap lyrics, but because everyone wants to seem cool and like, oh, I'm down with the streets, everyone pretends like they do and starts just using the slang. And quite frankly, that's incredibly childish, Obviously,
I can honestly say that I do not understand most rap lyrics.
But got to do what you got to do to get the Skrilla. Right. So let's start this episode of Oversight. So on this one, I think we'll go differently. Let's just start at the top, because I feel like it's awkward when a whole tournament's taken place to work your way back up and reconstruct the tournament and then get to the end where we all know who won the tournament. So there is no more weeks for stage one. Let's just start at the top. So London Spitfire won the tournament, and we had this bizarre scenario where we already saw the final at the beginning of the day, basically, just replayed later, but with a different winner. So let's start in the final. London Spitfire winning the tournament. Now, London Spitfire was a team who sort of was still coming together as the split went on, right, Monty?
Hold on. We do have to introduce Yiska properly. You called him both a teacher and not a teacher, and then also someone who makes illusions on Twitter. Some no-name content creator, isn't he? Done some things on esports heaven. I think people might actually like to know what he does in relation to Overwatch, don't you?
They'll look in the description box below. That is where he is right now in his career.
What you do, Yiska, because Thorin's really bad at it.
Well, I pretty much write for Winston's lab and hang out with the crew there, but I'm not part of the company, by the way. Which is an important distinction.
See what I mean?
Especially if you tend to get on hills on Reddit where you have possibly not politically correct opinions about how certain people are treated in the industry, i.e. observers. So
I see.
See, this guy doesn't do or not do anything, Monty. All he does is he's willing to pivot at any moment, no matter what the scenario is, to cover his motherfucking back, apparently. So, okay, let's rewind that. London Spitfire, team coming together as the season went on?
So this is a really weird team, and it's a very frustrating team for me because obviously everybody knows their potential, and we assumed that at some point they would be potentially challenging for an Overwatch championship. But the thing about London is that they've been playing so strangely. So their development over the course of stage one has been really measured. So they start out and they only run one roster, right, for the first couple weeks of competition. Then they start playing all of GC Busan suddenly, the reigning current Apex champions, forever Apex champions, I guess, if Apex doesn't come back. And they switch, and then they're only playing dive. So they start out with one roster. It's the non-GC Busan for the most part roster. Then they're all running a lot of dive, a lot of Reaper on attack with some tanks, playing very aggressively. Then they come back in week 4 after hitting some road bumps, losing some games here and there. That was the week they were upset by Boston when they were trying to dive versus Boston's dive. They come back week 4, and then they say, okay, we're going to suddenly play a lot of Junkrat. Junkrat's very strong right now. All the good teams, all the top teams, all our top 3 teams at the end of stage 1 are big Junkrat playing teams, big Junkrat Widowmaker teams. It's the best thing you could do in the current meta. And then they come back this week, and they decide that they are going to play dive again, almost exclusively, for whatever reason, lose to Houston. They only switch to a Junkrat Widowmaker defense on the final map versus Houston. And then they eventually end up switching back to Junkrat for the stage 1 playoffs and end up winning the entire thing. So I'm not exactly sure what's going on with this team, because when they're actually playing the meta, they're very good, but they have been doing things or strategies and refusing to switch off of them, which have caused them to lose games and matches.
Okay. And what did you think about the fact that their lineup that they actually used by the time they got to the final and won the championship, well, it was neither of the main lineups, and it was actually the mishmash lineup that had like some of the players who weren't on Kong2 and weren't on GC Boost. Do you think that they were still messing with the lineup, or do you think that they had this sort of planned in advance that they were going to make this particular lineup or something along those lines?
Well, one thing that I do know from talking to London is that in their practice facility, they finally got a setup like a week or two ago, a week ago maybe, where they have noise canceling headsets for all the players inside their practice room, and enough more computers, and that allowed them for the first time ever to start doing scrims against themselves. So by having all the noise canceling headsets, both teams were able to do comms in the same room together in their practice facility at the studio, the Burbank studio. And so they started doing inter-team scrims, and that allowed them, they said, to start figuring out which were the best combinations of players to use for different situations, because they could more freely mix it up. And I think that was the result of that was the lineup that we saw at for the stage 1 finals. So I think that's been a big advantage for them too, because there's a lot of things you can do with these inter-team scrims. I know Philadelphia was also super excited because they finally got their last 2 players in the States, Snillo and Echo. And they were saying that they were going to do scrims within the team as well. And obviously, we talked a little bit about that with ARC last week, but that allows you to hide strats. That allows you to force the team force one of the teams to mimic another team's style. Whereas if you're just normally scrimming, you're not going to be able to say, hey, if you're London, you're not going to be able to say, hey, San Francisco, can you pretend to be Seoul for a few minutes? Because that would really help us out if you're playing their compositions or they're using their positioning, because they're going to be like, fuck no, that's not going to help us at all. So I think all of these factors are part of London's rise here at the end.
Okay. Right, Yiska, what did you think then of the lineup we finally saw for Spitfire? Because obviously one of the key aspects of the season was they have been trying every seeming combination they could come with. So what allowed them to go on this run towards the end, do you think?
I think towards the end, the one substitution that actually really made the difference, if you also look at the different results, because he obviously played against both lineups before, where they played both Houston and NYXL and lost to them, and then turn it around in that playoff series, was actually getting Huyal out for the majority of that series. And I believe the one match he played in the final, they actually also lost, and getting Fury on. And that seemed to allow Bertring to have a lot more impact, because he seems to cover him basically more efficiently. Like Bertring had probably one of his best performances in the playoff series, despite previously being sort of inconsistent in these playoff level matches. So, for instance, GC Busan came to mind that series where he was completely dominated by Profit. But this time around, obviously, could also just be a change in mentality and being coached towards, being a big game player. But at the same time, I think Fury really made the difference, which is strange because I've been a big proponent of that Co-op 4. thing that completely is now thrown out of.
I was going to ask about what you thought about that now.
Yeah. For London, I mean, okay, so now it has been since November. It has been sort of that time frame where you can develop a new core. So even teams like Boston and Philadelphia that had to basically come from zero once again, it's like, okay, now you're getting into a territory where actually cores formed that then won tournaments. But for London, they haven't had that solid or the solid stage where you could say, okay, they developed that core over the season and now it flourishes. They basically tried out like what's that game called where you have like different colors and every turn you have to say, okay, now we have one color on the right spot or whatever.
Twister.
And they kept doing that basically the entire season until it was basically the winning lineup. And then again, it was very close. So
that was the most German description of Twister I've ever heard.
Here's the thing though, Monty, that actually might be the only sort of rational explanation for how they put this lineup together. We're like, right now, who Jarl, but he only comes in late on this one map and for him. And then after that, we go to this. And how would they pull that off? Just try. See if you can do it. Be flexible. I mean, Twister is all about being flexible, Monty. It's all about the flex picks in that game, mate.
That's true. I also don't know exactly why, like when they're putting in specific players, and I don't think even if I asked the coaches, they would tell me because
or
I don't
know
think
themselves.
Well, I mean, isn't it a benefit that they have in this team though? Having such a deep roster, you can kind of do some surprise picks, though, right?
Well, of course. I mean, that was what was so weird and so surprising a lot of the times because, like I said, when they fell to Boston in week 3, they come back in week 4 with like an entirely different group of players, and they play like I think they played in their next match. They played 11 players against Seoul. Yeah, it was the Seoul match. So they come back, and all of a sudden they're running like GC Busan, except with I believe it was Birdring and Rascal to start out, and then they went to all of GC Busan, and they completely changed their play style. So remember that Seoul preparing for London in week 4, they were looking at London and saying, this is a very aggressive team. This is a dive-based team. Now, we've beaten Boston very thoroughly because we're great at anti-dive. And all of a sudden, London shows up and they're playing Junkrat Widowmaker on defense, which is, I think, the best style to play in this current meta. And Seoul has no idea that they're going to do that. There was no reasonable way they could have prepared for the way London was playing because they went from a very aggressive team to a very defensive team in a span of a week. And then they used 11 players in one match and they 4-0'd Seoul. So
what was the significance of using that combo then? What did that change up?
The combo of
the Junkrat Widow.
Okay, so I mean, we can go into the actual right now, and if we look at the teams that were doing very well, it was at the end. It was Houston, New York, and later London once they actually did that. But for the most part, this meta is extremely generous to more defensive-minded teams, and what we see a lot of from Houston and New York is an ability to full hold on certain maps because they have these impenetrable like Orisa, Hog, Widowmaker, Junkrat defenses where they're constantly getting picks. Or they're sitting basically the Widowmaker in the back line. And the thing is, you can't dive effectively right now because of the existence of Mercy. So when you have Mercy, what she does to the metagame is not only does she make fights horrible to watch and cast, but she also, because of the changes to her resurrection, where she now has that channel time, what that means is she can't go into the front line unless she has Valkyrie to res somebody, because she can't just stand there and she'll just die, right? If she stands there trying to channel. But if you're trying to play dive, if you're trying to play Tracer and Genji, previously in all other versions of Overwatch, and what we will see again now that Mercy is nerfed, is that an attacking team playing a dive will get onto the Widowmaker, and if you trade 1-for-1, so let's say the Genji goes back there, kills the Widow, and then dies himself, dies to a Zenyatta or another DPS hero that's in the back line. Because attack spawns are typically closer, you can make that trade. And then you can come back and continue to win the fight and snowball from there. When you're playing with Mercy, if I trade the Genji in the back line for their Widowmaker, the defensive Mercy will res the Widow, and I can't go back there and resurrect the Genji unless I have Valkyrie to fly back there. And even then, it's dangerous. So basically, the metagame itself gave a huge boon two teams that could play Widow or Junkrat effectively, and Zenyatta as well, because these are long-range heroes that can sit back and cover angles, and they're damage boosted at the same time by Mercy. So you're looking at the ability to one-shot a lot of heroes with a damage boost on any of these heroes. Whoever you're putting the damage boost on is Mercy. So it ends up being a situation which, if you are very good at positioning and holding angles in this meta, you are going to be a very good team. And that's the thing that Houston, New York, and London were doing effectively. Once London actually figured out that they should stop fucking, playing dive on defense every map.
Okay. Anything to add to that, Yiska?
No, I think I generally agree. One thing that also gave Houston a push is that they are probably also one of the best teams to play against Junkrat. Because what an Overwatch League player pointed out to me was, and once again, hedging, not naming the names. But what he said was, when he plays Junkrat, it's incredibly hard to escape from Houston, because what they will do is, and that comes back to the quality of Coolmat, is that he will sense out when you would need to place your mine to get out, and he will eat that. So you need to pre-place your mine and know where they will engage you in order to get away from them, or you will die in the matter of the Matrix. So that was a pretty cool thing that obviously is often lost in translation of such a hectic game, but that seemed to be the bane for many Junkrat players they played against.
Okay, right. Obviously, the person who got all the big hype from the final was Birdring. Do you think if we gave just for the playoff run, would he be the MVP for Spitfire?
I think definitely, but there are some caveats. I think that while Birdring had a massive performance, it's really, I struggle with it, because when I was casting that, my frustration came from the fact that New York decided to run, again, the Genji Tracer dive all the time on the last three maps. And a lot of criticism has come from New York for playing Janus and all the maps they lost, and subbing out Mono, because Janus was also dying a lot of the time. But I think that was more they just kept throwing themselves into the Junkrat and the Widowmaker. And the thing is Libero, I think, had a very bad last half of the series on the Genji, because he was never really they never really figured out how to put any pressure on Birdring. So yes, while Birdring was performing well individually, it was also basically a shooting gallery for him, because he was constantly standing in the back line and nobody was there to deal with him ever. So I don't know. It's like you see this guy have a wild performance, but at the same time that it was made much easier because of New York itself.
Yeah. Okay. I think the series in general, I think that even in that meta, there were a couple of holes in New York's lineup. Specifically, I think they don't have played or at all have a very good Pharah, for instance. That's one, basically Icon Wall should probably be rather easy for you, just for that reason, because they don't have a Pharah. Then,
and you have Libero.
I mean, that
helps.
No, I think what needs to happen for them is to just the guy has to play basically everything, and you can't. What happened in the final was basically Profit was still playing at a star player level. With Birdring popping off, you can't expect that from Libero. I don't think he's a player like that can.
No, he's not.
Be a tide turner in these series, while obviously someone like a Pine and Saviobi definitely can. So maybe the solution for New York needs to be that to incorporate either Pine in more series, or have Libero, sort of be in a situation where he specializes in more characters and they just get a new DPS in, because they obviously have a lot of slots.
Well, they have a new DPS waiting, right?
True. Yes, very true. But
that's
only
I think
season, right?
Yeah, that's only next season. But I think the thing to consider about New York is that you could sign another DPS now. But is New York looking, I don't think New York, if I was New York and I'm coming into this season, I'm not saying to myself, I think, I'm really trying to be Overwatch League Season 1 champions. Obviously, it's nice if it happens, but you're looking at Season 2 when you have Flower, and you're also saying, we're bringing in Jonak as a true rookie, right, to the professional leagues. A lot of these other Korean teams have champions, like championship winning rosters already. If we look at Lunatic High or GC Busan, so I think New York is being smart and steady about how they build this out. And if I'm them, I'm just going to say, okay, well, we just wait for Flower. Why we already have this guy. Why do we need another DPS?
Okay. Do you think that in the final, Jonak had problems on the losses? I mean, he seemed to be pretty quiet, right?
I think both he and Ark had problems because a lot of this, when we saw New York early in the season, the criticism that we had was not that they weren't great individually. It was that they were having trouble coordinating their support ultimates and their ult economy. So they would pop off, but sometimes like Jonak would seem to like randomly trance. And I think we did see that. I think that they got really stressed out in the finals. And like when they started losing, I think we started seeing them revert to that state where the support ults were quite poor.
Yeah. I think in general, this meta had like 4 different patterns of success. And one of them was, I think by the time this comes out, Baroy will have written an article about this. He calls it, I think, the golden ratio or something. And till the last day, and obviously the last day switched a lot of the standings around, you could perfectly map the performance of the flex support to the league standing. So the better your flex support was in, I think, PTK share, so how much kills he got of the ultimate amount, basically determined your placement. So obviously Jonak was the outstanding player, but also Bedosin, very much like a Jonak, because he also has huge impact, also does the damage, but he also has problems with ultimate economy management, which was better this series and probably was a determining factor in winning it. You know, it was very close. Like, I think overall, London won over the series. London won 42 fights and NYXL won 40. And the kills were 254 to 49. So that was 5 kills difference in the entire series.
It was a crazy series.
And obviously it could have been a 3-0, right?
Yes.
Yeah, I guess.
On Oasis. I mean, they went
Horizon.
Yes,
yeah.
Horizon.
Yes.
Connolly.
It was the third map. So
yes,
that was a close one. But that's also been one of New York's worst maps and one of London's better ones. So I didn't think that was a good chance for them to close it out.
How did the map draw actually affect the final? Do you think? Because obviously when they played earlier, it was different maps, right?
Dorado was the only same map between the two. And going back to Pine, by the way, you mentioned him. I was sort of surprised after they had just lost the last 2 games that they didn't put Pine in for Dorado because they had lost Dorado earlier in the day. They were in danger of a reverse sweep, and Pine has played Dorado for them in the past because you could play a lot of Widowmaker and McCree on that map. So I guess I was a little surprised that they didn't try that. Maybe they didn't want to make any kind of like bold moves later on. But for example, on Junkertown, I remember looking at the stats while I was casting the match, and Pine had something like 22 final blows, and Birdring only had 11 in Junkertown. So he was like hard winning the DPS duels.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay.
Do we know how the maps were determined in the final? Because naturally, if the game goes to a game 5, it should have normally been under the normal system we had the entire season. Should have been King of the Hill, right? So then Pine would have come in once again. How was it Dorado?
I'm not exactly sure how the map pool was generated for the playoffs in particular. I do think it's weird that, like you're saying, where you spend all of this time playing these best of 4s where the determining map could be a control map, which the results of the regular season weight slightly towards control favored teams like New York.
Yes.
But the playoffs do not do that. Now, if we had a draw and it was like 2-2 and a draw, we would have gone to Lijiang as a 6th map.
That's hurting my brain. Okay. So, are they aware of that?
Yes. So like, for example, if you have a 2-2 draw, let's say on Horizon, and then each of the teams wins 2 maps in the best of 5, you have to have a tiebreaker map, which we had at Apex as well. But it was, in this case, it was going to be going back to control on Lijiang. So.
Well, the thing is, Yiska, to not in any way seriously answer your question, what Blizzard did was they tried to make it so that there was as many different maps played so that the London Spitfire didn't get bored playing all those games in one day. And, kept it spicy, kept it fresh, just kept them in the game, because obviously this is esports now. Okay, here's a question.
Let's just say this. Just say this. I am going to be working to change some things about the format, for things moving forward. So I would like to see some, more consistency, I think, in the map pool or how these map pools are determined.
Are you going to have beds provided in the practice room so the teams can sleep in between these series on 10-hour days?
Nate has already said that he is looking into changing that and setting the playoffs to Sunday, which I think is obviously the best possible. I mean, you do either one of two things. You have a flexible schedule so that in the final week of competition, you can move matches around so that you can move the matches that will affect the playoffs onto a like Friday or something like that, or you open up another day to have just the playoff matches occur. I would prefer just putting them on Sunday instead. That's fine with me. I'll go into the studio. But yeah.
Okay. Well, okay then. Since we've opened up that kind of worms, let's address it then. That is outrageous. Whoever planned this, that you could potentially play 3 whole series in a day if you're one team who ended up winning the tournament. Like, I can't think of anything comparable to that in esports for like a long time. Even an amateur LAN wouldn't do that. If they did that, in fact, people would go, "This is why it's an amateur LAN. You're never going to be a top esports thing if you do that." Like, that's why actually I thought what was really lame was all these people who were like, "Why are you complaining? He said he'll change it next season." It's like, well, why was it ever like that in the first place? What are you talking about, you idiot? How many millions does have to be put in before you think in advance? What could happen here if a team was to play a last match and then also have to play 2 more games in a row? I don't even know. I mean, forget the part about playing the last game. Why would you even play the game, basically the semi-final, before the final anyway? Why wouldn't that be on separate days, So this could have definitely been warded off before it became a problem.
Yes, I think you're absolutely right. And I think that one of the weaker parts of Overwatch League in general has been the format, because I think that when we previously had these best of 4 series, even when we had a limited map pool, say in contenders, you could still have, even though there was a specific order, right, of like which map type comes first, whether it's like, right now in this stage we had, we switched it over to have like, escort, then assault, then control, and then hybrid at the end. And previously, like in contenders, the losing team could pick out of the map pool. So usually we'd have 2 to 3 maps of any given type. And so when you lose, you can pick the next one. So let's say you lose and the next map is control. Well, you can pick the control map that you want to play, which I think makes series more exciting. Like there's no downside to it because the team that loses can choose the map of their preference so that they have potentially a better chance to win and make series more even or make series more interesting. And now we don't even have that. So, like, I haven't been a huge fan of the way the format has been run in general. As to your point where you say maybe the semis and the finals should be on different days, I think that's so first off, it's not like the stage playoffs have the biggest implication in the world. They have no effect on the standings, like none. So New York is still in first place at 9-1. They didn't technically lose that match. The only thing they lost was prestige and the 100K prize. The only reason we play this is for money. Okay. So it's not going to affect London in the standings, not going to affect New York in the standings at the end of the day. So I don't mind having the semis and finals back to back because I think that's a reward for being in first place at the end of the stage is that you don't have to play as many games and in the gauntlet style of competition.
When you've got that many weeks, though, come on, you can get another day.
Well, that's what I'm saying. Move it to Sunday. But I'm saying, like, I don't mind having the semis and finals back to back on one day.
Plus, like I said, I actually think a move. I wish Riot had done this as well. They also have ignored this the entire time. If you're going to do a league format and you're going to have these little playoffs, split the prize money. Let some, like, a New York Excelsior for winning 9 out of 10 matches should get some prize money just for first place. Never mind if they win the final, Like, I think you should celebrate both aspects. I mean, it's a bit like in hockey, you have like the President's Cup or whatever, if you're the team with the most points. I think it's good to reward the teams who just did the other phase of the tournament well as well. That way, especially if you're going to say it's not as big a deal for these stage playoffs, and you're going to make it more like that. Because where's all the prize money over there?
That's true.
You know, make it a bit of both or something.
I have to say, but personally, I actually think that these playoff matches should have more impact than they are.
I agree. I agree with you there too.
Yeah, the loser should have to execute one of their players, and that should be like a really hefty price. But in doing so, like, you know, it puts a lot of competitive value on the league. You know, it means that players are going to play their hearts out. It's going to mean a lot to them. You know, I know there's no points on the line, just their lives. So.
No, but doesn't it feel like if you actually structurally make it so that these games mean less and less, that is it not bad, sort of like as a not just a viewership experience, but also for competitive players who really want to win these? So, for instance, compare this to the CSGO circuit, right? It's like saying, okay, all these other tournaments. That's probably a bad example because you don't have any circuit points. But if that was the case,
circuit points are the way it should be done. I agree.
Yeah. So something that just makes it feel like, okay, you obviously the final playoffs will be the pinnacle, our TI, our major or whatever. But like if we have milestone tournaments that still feel like small peaks in the competition, I think that could also be a potential draw for the.
I agree with you. Like what like I don't know what to say. Like these are all issues that like I totally agree, and I do think that it's nice that we have the stage playoffs to provide those little peaks, but they're not as meaningful as I would like them to be either. And the other problem I have is that all of the games are weighted equally, which I think is really dangerous. One of my favorite things about League of Legends, for example, are you familiar with their circuit point system at all?
Yeah.
So for those that aren't. Basically, like the spring split is worth less circuit points than the summer split because they have a recency bias, because if in the World Championship immediately follows the summer split. So you want to have the teams that are best in that meta and on that patch going through. So if a team is really good in the spring but has a disastrous summer, you don't want them to like auto qualify for the World Championship and shit up the international competitions, which happened.
Shout out.
So I think what should occur is right now all the matches are weighted equally. So if you win a game now and you're New York and you're 9-1, that game is weighted the exact same as winning it right before the playoffs. So I don't like this. I would like the stage playoffs to actually affect a ranking, which you get circuit points. Everything resets for the next stage, and you're fighting for circuit point chunks that are increasing. So stage 1, maybe you get 50 for circuit points for first place and 40 for second place or whatever, right? But then stage 2, you get 60 circuit points for first place, and then by the end maybe you get like 100 circuit points for first place. So that may be too extreme. For example, I haven't I haven't sat down and like looked at the actual numbers, but the point is to allow some level of recency bias so that by the time we're in the playoffs, because right now we could actually have a team like New York. Let's say New York goes, they do 9-1 again, so they're 18-2 after 2 stages, but then all of a sudden the meta changes. Some player gets injured and they start to absolutely be atrocious in stages 3 and 4. And maybe they go 5-5 in each of those stages. But because they have 18-2, all of a sudden they're like a playoff team now. And that could be like a really negative outcome come the playoffs. And I would also like to see more emphasis placed on these mini tournaments, because I don't like leagues as a concept. Sure. I think that this should be structured as like, I like what we have right now, but I would like maybe another week of playoffs. So like we have what we just had, which is a round robin, basically, and then maybe we have another weekend just of playoffs for the stages or something like that, so that it does feel more like a 5-week or 6-week long tournament. Take a break and then do it again.
Well, plus another flaw of the way that this was structured was, even if it's the exact same structure but just on different days, it also did, like, here's the thing. To a player, I'm sure that these stage playoffs actually did matter more than the rest of the stage. If you're in the final, I don't think New York Excelsior was like, no big deal that we lost. We know we're first place. Obviously, they're crushed. But one thing that kind of sucks is you go straight from the last matches into the playoffs. There wasn't time to like build it up and to be like, here's how the two teams did, and here's how they're going to match up, and here's all the great shoulder content that we do for what would happen when they play.
it also just makes for worse matches because they actually can't prepare for each other. Yes. So what's I think is frustrating for the teams too is that so much of this league is about you have 2 opponents a week. You have a week to prepare for them. We're looking at the strats. That's what gives you good games of Overwatch where you can see the mind games and like they're maximally prepared for each other. But when you have this scenario, it's like, well, you can't prepare, so good luck. And you just end up with worse games as a result. Yeah, the games that should be the best are the worst.
Yeah, and it's, especially if you look at all the series that Korean teams played against each other, it was obvious that all their preparation that week went into beating that Korean team and coming up with crazy strategies. And it was almost like, it's like you need to sort of counter what they probably run to your default. It was actually very high level mind games for the most part. And sometimes you just crap the bed like Seoul did, and they outmaneuver themselves. The problem is you scrim the entire week that one strategy. You can hardly dial it back then. But the problem is also inherently, if you look at how the league is set up, it's not like you go from, first season ends, 1 month pause, and then second season starts. Inherently, there's a much larger time window where people obviously also develop and whatever, or get new signups in, or let some people go. So the first stage of every Overwatch League season will always be uncertain. Then the second stage also has the sign-up windows. So that a lot of stuff changes. That is also a very good reason why these stages should matter less, because a lot of teams are still trying stuff out. And then I would even argue that stage 3 and stage 4 should, it's hard to say that or to incorporate that in development, but they probably should also run on a meta that is fairly stable to also the final playoffs as well. So half the season is like finding the formula, and then the last half would be that.
One thing that Riot has also been really good at commenting on this from the League of Legends side has been that for the World Championship, when it gets to the end of summer, now sometimes they throw in a bunch of like weird shit and changes at the end of the summer season, which I've complained about in the past. But during the World Championship, they don't patch, right? So the meta is very stable for a couple of months. And I think that's one of their worst qualities is throwing a shit ton of stupid changes in right before that happens. But one of their best qualities is actually just maintaining that level, right? And I think that does have to be a conversation with the development team eventually about trying to, as difficult as it can be sometimes, schedule their balance changes around the competitive calendar.
To be fair, they did that for this season, right? So the thing is still running, but they kept the patch, which is, it is sort of anticlimactic for some fans who are probably only playing tank meta at the moment, right?
But you have to do it that way because no game will immediately put into use a patch, except for Counter-Strike, right? We'll put into use a patch, like in competitive as soon as it comes out. Because so for example, if there are bugs that are accidentally introduced with a new patch and they show up in a professional game, it's a disaster. So you have to wait like a week for them to like tweak things, make sure there aren't any bugs, make sure the players have time to practice it. So it's not just a waste of time and bad games. So I agree with waiting a couple weeks.
Which is also why we do it in Counter-Strike, because obviously like there aren't like a bazillion interactions between all the different heroes, and it's not like a gun just completely changes and the player's like, what the fuck, I didn't use this gun, so the actual changes are pretty small, so it's not really
except for that revolver patch that made things crazy.
Well, that was luckily taken out the very next day, so that wasn't a problem. But I tell you what, mate, for as much as I complained on Twitter, what a day that was. I was just in there all day long just fucking wrecking kids. It was amazing. Don't worry, I'm one of those like fucking Shakara's take hypocrites who's like, this is OP as fuck, just using it all the time myself. Then when it gets banned, I'm like, good, and then in private I'm like, shit, gotta find something else now.
So what you're saying is you were actually a Mercy main, Thorin. Is that what I'm hearing?
Listen, mate, no joke. When I used to play League of Legends a decent amount, I used to just spam the fuck out of Janna and Nami. I didn't give a fuck, son. I just wanted them wins. I wasn't trying to get good at the game or anything, mate. I was just trying to win those games. So, okay, here's a question.
Were you crushed when Mercy was nerfed?
Not really. I thought it was crap in the game, actually. Like, here's the thing. If it could be incorporated a bit better, I like it, because it kind of actually, I think, adds a dynamic that you don't have in a lot of games, because it reminds me a little bit of, like, the buybacks in Dota 2. The problem is, I do feel like you can only either have, like, an OP Mercy meta or one where it's barely used. Like, I feel like it's one of those ones that's very, very hard to balance in that sense. So I don't really know how you could incorporate it so it was, like, used sometimes and in niche areas, because...
I think it is going to be niche. I think we're going to still see it in the professional scene.
Okay.
It's still going to be good with Farah, no matter what. So, like, I do think we are still going to see it. I just wish that my wish is that there was some way to make Resurrection like a mechanically demanding ability. As weird as that sounds,
what happens is when you go to do it, it spins.
It's
up
a quick
sort of
time
like
event. No, it's a quick time event where it's like press G and like
exactly.
You have to do
it's like Dance Revolution. You have to do a combo as it comes on the screen. If you fuck it up, you don't get the res. Exactly.
That's what I want it to be, and like the faster you can do it, the faster you res. I would.
Here we go, Monte.
Or it's like Osa on the screen where you're like clicking all the bubbles really fast
Monte,
and like
I've
have to do it perfectly in rhythm. That would be shit. That would be the shit. Mercy is a rhythm game.
This is what you do when it does that. And by the way, Mercy is a rhythm game. Just reminds me of Rhythm is a Dancer by a classic 90s song.
Anyway, that should be our title. Mercy is a rhythm game.
Okay, no, here's what you do, Monty. I've got the fix for you. When you have those like 5 seconds where it's quickly making you do the game, like 5 bubbles are on the screen, and each of them that you get with the rhythm move, you get like 20 health or something for the other guy. And if you get all 5, he's fully rezzed at full health, but otherwise, you're just partially rezzing them. Not bad, right? So if you have a shit Mercy, cool, you get to come back to life. You have like 10 health. You're like, what the fuck? He instantly gets popped. That's pretty good, right? That's not bad. Get on that mechanic, Blizzard. That's fire. Okay.
To be fair, the differences between a good Mercy and a bad Mercy is not apparent to the viewer, but is incredibly large. Like Ark died, I think, 10 less times that series than what's his name?
Nuss.
Anyway,
Nuss, obviously. Who had actually a pretty good series for his for his
Yiska, it was a joke.
Yeah. No, I understand.
He is German, remember. Is everyone aware that he's German? Okay. He's like, but no, why would you have the rhythm game? This is a champion for healing. What does healing have to do with dancing? This is no connection. This is silly. Why are you? I do not recommend this change for Blizzard. Like, okay. Anyway, moving it back a second. Here's the question for you.
You are right. You are right. Like Ark actually did have a much better I was watching a lot of his death statistics too, and Ark's positioning is just incredibly good with his team on Mercy. You watch a couple of those early maps, and I said this on the broadcast too, that he will delay his reses during Valk because he is waiting for Defense Matrix to be up to cover him or in a resub area. So New York will literally just sit there and be like, you see the timer, it's like, because they're waiting, the respawn timer is like 10 seconds. So they're like, it's like 8 seconds. You're like, is he actually going to res that guy? But it's because all of a sudden you'll see like a resub barrier pop up to cover him when he goes in. So his whole team like plays around his Valkyries. It's been really cool to watch actually.
So, okay, since New York Excelsior obviously almost did win this game, who on New York Excelsior actually was legit good and performed to their level? Like, for example, was Sabiel B what you expected him to be? Did he have some games where he looked a bit contained? What do you say on that front?
You're shaking your head.
I don't think Sabiel was playing to his level, and I think he also, this almost is a little bit of the LW Blue curse, where I personally, like, people keep saying he's the best tracer in Overwatch League. I don't agree. I think there's probably at least, I mean, you have to talk about Birdring now. You have to definitely talk about Prophet. You have to talk about Striker. And Sabiobi also has much more so. When I had this discussion with Sideshow, where he said that Flower dives under in playoff series situations, I thought that was much more the case for Sabiobi. So I don't know, and he also didn't play every map, to be fair.
Yes, he didn't play the first one.
Yeah, so I don't know. I don't think he had a captain performance as much. And obviously, I remember when he was picked up for the World Cup team, the reason was he can shot call. I don't know if he actually does that for New York Excelsior. So that would obviously explain why sometimes. Like, I've also heard this from players, is that sometimes Sabiobi will be sick And then it's almost like someone switched the off switch and he just dies without using any recall or any blinks, and in a time frame where the top tracers would use that. So I don't know what's happening there.
I thought he did play really well on Oasis. In fact, he was one of their clutch. Mm-hmm. He came up really clutch with some kills at the end in some of those overtime rounds when New York was coming back. I thought he actually played pretty well on Dorado as well. The other two maps besides Dorado that they lost, I think he really failed to show up in. But his Dorado play on Widowmaker and then on Tracer was actually very good on Dorado. So I think a lot of their problems, though, again, was going back to mistimed support ultimates or Janice dying, and that wasn't always Janice's fault, because they were running the dive constantly, and when you run the dive into a damage boosted Widowmaker and Junkrat, like the Winston tends to explode. So I think it was a lot of strategic misplays by New York and doing weird stuff that we're not used to them seeing, because if we think about them throughout the whole season, it's all been about slow, methodical setups, even on attack, and going dive into that was just suicide. So,
right, being as these two teams did play at the beginning of the day, but there was the caveat that London just needed to win one game to make the playoffs, and they did immediately. Right. Was that actual first series of a similar caliber to the second one? What do you think changed between the two?
I think it actually was pretty good. I'm actually surprised that the teams put as much effort into that as they did, because like you're saying, once London won a map, they were guaranteed. And once New York won two maps, they were guaranteed to be first. And so that meant that the last map effectively was not going to change anything, and yet London still tried very hard to win Dorado and send it to Lijiang, right? That's a map where I think London could have easily said, we don't want to. We might play, because Dorado again was the map that the only map that they would have played again in the finals. So London could have easily said, let's just do something super standard. Let's not show our strategy. Let's not really, put everything out there, because we may have to play this map again later in the day against this very same team. Yet they did try very hard on that map, and they did send it to a map 5, even if they had won the series, there was no positive result for them. Besides obviously just winning the match, yes, and that being consequential later on.
Yeah, obviously. That's the big thing, that also some people said, like, Boston so Boston is now not in the playoffs, and obviously they're not going to try win that series. Why not play Symmetra or something? It's always like a vessel just blows up in my head when I read these things, as if it wasn't a league that in the end really determines. And obviously, winning series is the primary factor, right? So how many series you won? It's not about maps as much. So, like, why would you toy around in any match unless it's in stage 4 and you're guaranteed to not be in playoffs? Obviously, yes, you should try hard every single match. And while I can see that it's hard to rationalize that from a human component, because it's hard to sort of see how many matches or how things will matter in the future, it's just like there's nothing in place where this match matters less than the one that could potentially put you in playoffs in the last week.
Yes.
And also, we had 4 7-3 teams coming into, or like 5, I guess now, or no, 4 7-3 teams coming into this week. And we saw how much even map differential matters for the stage playoffs, for the standings as they are right now. And I agree, you don't want to fuck around with that, because come stage 4, winning a map or winning a match here could be the difference between you making playoffs or a seeding in the playoffs or not. So you might as well give it your all. In fact, it's more important than just the $100,000 for the stage playoffs. That doesn't affect your record or your ultimate ability to make it into the actual league playoffs itself in July. So.
Yes, this is actually, Overwatch League is the anti-Lincoln Park League, because in the end it does even matter. Well, actually, it's more, in that match, it was more like the Linkser Park League.
Very
not
good.
Bad. Any more material here? Right, okay, let's talk about that match then, because obviously that one had mad implications, where if Boston won the game, they would have been the ones instead of Houston who was in that match, right? Obviously, even though they didn't make it, Boston's had a pretty amazing season, right? All things considered, and would they have actually had a better chance than Houston if they'd have been in the playoffs, bearing in mind they had to play London?
I would say no, not in this meta. I think if we're talking about when the meta shifts into a more dive-focused meta again, Boston's going to be even better than they are right now. I think we got the right teams in the playoffs for this one, with London, Houston, and New York, which were the best teams playing this style and the best teams in this meta. But I am excited to see what Boston does in the future because of how quickly they've grown and how many styles they have effectively shown us now.
Okay, yeah. What's your take, Yiska?
I think they just play. Sometimes it's just so methodical and just textbook Overwatch. Like if you want to understand what happens in that meta too, like just looking at Boston and seeing how just some fundamental things. So for instance, there was a situation where they win the fight decisively on defense, but Dream Casper dies almost at the same point that the other team would. Most teams would just stay on the point and just try to have the position there. But what Boston regularly does is they push back towards their spawn in order for their DPS to catch up. They don't care that they lose 20% on the channel to the Tracer or whatever. They will calm and collectedly then re-engage onto the spot, and they do that also pretty well. It's just sometimes they don't execute as well on these fundamentals, but they're definitely there. And I would have to go in depth on every single team again, but they might have the best fundamentals strategically in the league.
It's probably them or Seoul, honestly, because Seoul is super good at stalling and, like you're saying, coming back onto points on like assault maps where they'll give up a little bit just to make sure that they can actually hold on a defense. But I think that's an astute observation.
Okay. So, since the Houston team made the playoffs, now the circumstances in which they made it was no joke. They obviously had to beat London Spitfire and then beat Boston as well. Like, I was thinking when I saw that lineup, like, they're all of a sudden going to be the team that's looking back on that game they had against, was it Seoul that they were playing against? Yes, the one that they lost.
They
had the subs in.
They had Clockwork, yeah.
Yes, exactly. I was thinking that's going to be like the heartbreaker there, where you're like, if we'd have won that one more. But obviously they made it in anyway. What has Houston showed us these last few weeks? Because, if you remember the way their schedule was, in the middle period was where like they were getting all those wins in a row, like the map streak, but it wasn't like the best teams, So I kind of expected them to level off a bit, I didn't think they'd make this strong push. So, why were they a team that was in the top 3 in the end?
I think.
Well, you go.
Okay, so there's another pattern that is also very apparent if you analyze the best rosters is that they tend to have the best tank lines and support lines. And there's only one team that really is not bad, where the DPS tend to be the best performers, which is Philly. Every other team, the tank lines and the support lines often build the core, but also are just the fundamental structures that your team is built on, and then the DPS put you on top. Now, obviously, the tank line is insane on Houston. Like, I'm not sure if they will be able to replicate that in that meta, because it seems to be like the best scenario right now, right? With Wuma on Winston and Coolmat on Diva. That's obviously their main picks. I don't think they played much else most of the season. And then obviously Rock has really impressed me. Also one of the stronger performers. And then they had this sort of switch around where they sometimes put in Boink, but most of the time it was Banny, who, by the way, had an insane last couple of minutes on in that series against Boston. Like, if you want to actually watch what Mercy carry looks like, watch Night Market against Boston. Banny clutched that and basically put them in the finals there. So obviously it's strange to say that this final moment was the case, but yeah, if you look at it, they probably win that last fight on Night Markets because Banny clutches it.
And it does help that they have one of the top Mercy players right now. I think Houston has done a very good job of adapting to this specific meta. Banny, it helped that they had, again, one of the best Mercies in the league. It helped that they had a fantastic Junkrat player in Jake. It helped that they had a fantastic Widowmaker in Linkser. It helped that they had a cohesive tank line with Muma and Coolmat. This is a team that was really built for success in this meta. I said it last week, and Muma disagreed with me, that I was concerned about their ability to transition out of this meta, which I still am. I am slightly less concerned now because I saw Coolmat doing a very good job playing Zarya, which I had not seen in many months, because he's actually, up until Game 5 against Boston, I believe he had exclusively played Diva only, like actually only Diva, except for maybe some stalls at some point or another on a point. I know, like, Houston as a team had played something like 98% of their time on Diva as a team, and the only other time was when, like, Spree was on Zarya in week 1 for some maps that they put him in. So I was sort of concerned that they weren't going to have flexibility at the off-tank position, even though in the past, before people get mad at me, yes, I know Coolmat has been pretty good on Roadhog, and yes, I know he's been pretty good on Zarya, but I haven't seen it recently, nor do I know if he's even been practicing that, but that was an encouraging sign. I guess I don't really know who, if they play triple tank in the next meta, who exactly is going to play their third tank. I don't know what Linkser or Jake are, if they're skilled in that department. I would assume Linkser is a good enough fucking player to play some Roadhog or something like that with some practice. I am concerned that they're not going to have the same level of flexibility as they have right now. Again, they were strong with Mercy. They were strong with the Widow and with the Junkrat. Junkrat will still be good, but Houston's issue is that whenever they make a substitution, it's extremely obvious what their strategy is going to be. It's like, when Spree goes in, you know the Zarya is going to get played. I assume later when Boink goes in, we're going to know, hey, it's Lucio time, right? So I do think they're a bit easy to read. And also, they are so bad at control in general. Like, the control has been a giant weakness for them. And you can't just like have auto losses in your map pool. Like, you can't just say, well, I guess, because for them, being bad on control is actually a disaster, because you say, okay, we're basically giving up one map for free, which means that if we give up any one of the other 3 maps, we're going to go to a tiebreaker. What happens in a tiebreaker? That's right, control. And then I think they did okay on Lijiang versus Boston, but I wouldn't want to have that weakness with tiebreaker also being in control. So that's something that I think they've really got to work on.
Okay. So coming into the Overwatch League, if you told someone, oh, you know that Seoul Dynasty team? Yeah, they won't even be in the playoffs, actually. Like, they're actually going to... The last 2 weeks are going to go like this. They're going to get utterly smashed by London Spitfire. They're barely going to beat Houston without even some of the best players. They're going to just get beaten by Valiant, who's already dropping off a cliff, and then they're just going to close it all out by narrowly beating the San Francisco Shock. What? Does Shock get really good at the end? No, spoiler, they don't. So this is a bit of a depressing end to this play, isn't it? What happened? What happened to Seoul Dynasty? Also, where is my man Miro? Is he alive still? Is that some sort of shade from the underworld? Just playing out his death over and over. What happened? He used to be the best.
I guess I have to be an iconoclast here in saying that I think he was not the Winston icon for quite a long time for me.
Okay.
Like he
just had that rep still.
He had the rep,
but it's like Gesture and Fisher were way better for the most part in 2017.
Definitely. And sometimes you could see that, yes, he was somewhere there, but then he also had very deep drop-offs. And most of the time, if Lunatic High struggled, he was actually one of the people that was exploited the most. And you can reliably these days build your strategy on exploiting Miro. And it like the problem is, for instance, in that GC Busan, okay, that's quite a while ago, but still, like, he was the reason why Zumba was so often taken away from protecting his support line, and Prophet would just run up to Jaehong, and before he can even react, or Toby could, he would just one clip them. So, because the only thing that can realistically shield your Zen from blowing up from a tracer that just has perfect aim in that moment is a matrix that is sort of available by being sort of close. Now, if Miro was to overextend every single time, obviously Zumba is out of position there, and that back in the day, the GC Busan series, that was basically what lost it for me. And then also, I don't know, if the guy even doesn't even shot call, why would you not just say, okay, let's try playing, I don't know, even like 2 or 3 weeks with Cookie and see if something develops there.
Okay. So was there a factor?
I was surprised we didn't see any Cookie in the last few weeks. Like the last couple of weeks, it's just been no Cookie at all, and Miro has been not playing well. So
is the speculation there then that, okay, within the team, because he's like a elevated status player and he's a captain type figure, that they just rode it out with him, and maybe this is what's going to spur him now being the bench player and Cookie just being the player from now on in the team?
It's possible. Like I said, I think it's really weird that how little Cookie we've seen as of late. Especially because Miro does seem to be a weak link on the Seoul roster. I do think that this is a team that has the pieces to improve and will be doing better in the next meta. Obviously, when their Mercy play has been mediocre at best. And when you have, like, Toby's Mercy play he's been dying first a lot, either him or Miro. And then when you have Jae-Hong on the Mercy, you lose a lot of playmaking ability from your support position. So that sucks for them, even if they're losing the Mercy less in some of these fights. It just hasn't been a great meta. It has not been a great meta for Seoul. So I think any change to that will be a welcome one. And we'll see probably a revitalized, better Seoul on the other side. However, I think the problems that they can't solve is, do they have a top tier tank? Because they're not playing Cookie. Maybe they don't believe he is, or Miro hasn't been playing great. The only consistent players on that roster, in my mind, have been Zunba, Fleta, and Jae-Hong.
I have to say, if I was, bearing in mind the amount of talent that must be out there in Korea you could sign, I would just be dumping Munchkin right now. Like, I don't claim to be an expert at the game, but I just have seen nothing from that guy.
The second DPS is the biggest problem. I mean, whether it's Bunny, Munchkin, Wikid, like, they don't have a true second threat right now. And that hurts them against teams like London or New York that can shut down their Tracer players very effectively.
Meanwhile, fucking New York Excelsior's like, welcome, Flower, also to the team. Like, fucking, how many do you need? Greedy little fucks.
Yeah. Well, I mean, think about London. Like, they have Prophet, Rascal, Birdring, and Hureg. Okay. I mean, okay, maybe Hureg is like the least good out of all of those, but still an embarrassment of riches.
It just sucks to be a team that has a position where they're weak on, and you already have 2 players that should be playing that position, right?
Yeah.
Like, it's...
Well, but that's what sucks, right? Because, yeah, absolutely. Like, you come in and I don't think Seoul recruited poorly in getting Bunny and Munchkin. No. They were looking around and they're like, hey, we really need a strong Tracer player. But what if that guy doesn't work out? Let's get another one just in case, right? I think they were responsible in the way they added to their lineup. It just unfortunately hasn't worked. And I think in the long run, they can always sign, obviously, more players and try them out and find that second DPS threat. Because in one way, they lost. In one way, they picked up players who we thought were going to be good, who haven't been able to translate that performance into, like, take it to the next level, especially with the kind of support and that they have around them now. But on the other side, Fleta is way better than even anybody, like even the biggest fucking Fleta fanboy who is like, this guy is the ultimate diamond in the rough, could never have predicted that he would be this good. So they sort of, like, in Seoul, combing through all the bottom Apex teams to find the good DPS players. They hit one jackpot and they hit a couple duds. It's not so bad.
Well, here's the thing. I wonder if Yiska was smiling at the same thing, because I will credit this, okay? He actually did do a piece of content with Sideshow where the premise was, before he'd even played in Overwatch League, that Fleta was like the best player in the world. So, whatever. Your stupid fucking needle and ace, that call has worked for you, son. It's bullshit.
You get one in your life.
Yes, exactly. But fair play, I'll give it to you for that one. Okay.
I sort of lost the one where I said NYXL was going to underperform, didn't I?
Well, did you? Did you in a way?
He did. He pretty much did. In all meaningful ways, he did. You can't rescue that one, Monty. Okay, what about this then? So obviously, as I kind of alluded to there, like, Valiant at one point in time looked like the best non-Korean team. I remember that means as non-full Korean team. Obviously, they have Koreans in their team. Now, what went wrong for this team? Obviously, they had the weeks where they couldn't play with all the players, but shouldn't this have been a playoff team?
I think they too have a lack of a true second DPS threat. You have Soon, who's been playing magnificently, and silk-threaded agilities have been subbing in and out depending on the map and the style and the hero pool they want to go for. But this is a team that I think could really use AKM, even though AKM is now going to Dallas Fuel, not only because of his history with the team, but because you can always bring in agilities or silk thread if you need a Genji. But for the most part, I think that AKM's hero pool with the Pharah and the Soldier and the secondary hit scan would really bring even more punch to the Valiant roster. They also were strugglers in the Mercy meta. Unco was pretty bad on the Mercy, and one of the things that they did was that in this last week of competition, it was Unco back on flex support and Kareev playing the Mercy, which I think was a big improvement. They had Silk Thread back as well. So I think they've been making adjustments to who plays what hero, and that has had a pretty significant impact on their standings. Okay.
What did you think the problems were for Valiant, Yiska?
I think one was obviously sickness in a way.
Yeah.
So Valiant, I thought they were going to be one of the better Western teams. I'm even sort of surprised how well that is going especially with the French guys. And it sort of makes you wonder what would have happened if you actually took in the entire roll call.
There we go. He's gone and done it, and he's involved the name. All
right. There's still hope for the future. We'll get some at PSG. Okay, they'll buy the Parisian slot, and then we'll have a. What about this? What if it was Gamers, Origin, and Rogue? Just get all of the French players on a 12-man roster. Actually, it would be pretty good.
Also, Noah Winston would probably look pretty good in French clothing with his head and a baguette. I dig it. Yeah. But, no, I think, realistically, they were one game away, Boston was one game away from playoffs. Exactly. So, for them to be in playoffs. So, I don't know if you can actually fault them much other than for giving up too many maps to lesser opponents. And, it's unfortunate that, especially sometimes if you have to switch out your main support, where a lot of shot calling comes from, that can actually really hurt your team, possibly as much as a star player would in that case. If it's still a very nebulous concept where what shot calling actually is in Overwatch, because it's strange. Like sometimes teams that were once very successful can't even tell me who does what. It just happens. It's just something that, like, people have certain roles that they occupy, like easy stuff like, okay, what's your role status? Just asking in between fights, or someone hitting tab if the opponent switched champions. Sometimes you don't know who's doing that. That's just a subconscious thing. So if you don't construct these teams top down, so the coach tells you did that, you do that, and you have like a list of things this person does, and then you don't look at your comms, you're often lost if you just have to switch in. That said, I thought Verbo actually, for the most part, did better than I expected.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially considering he hadn't been scrimming with the team, apparently, because that's what he said on Twitter.
Definitely.
What I love about this is also a German person encountering a team where there's no order, and he's like, "But who is calling this? But how does it happen? Who gives the command? Who gives your command? Who's your commanding officer?" Like,
I need top-down structure.
It's brilliant. Yeah. Like, I don't know if you're aware of this, but I'm pretty sure half those NA teams just did whatever the fuck they wanted anyway. Okay, I actually think in this team, Valiant, for me, the person who's like raised his stock the most has to be Envy. What a fucking phenomenal player that guy is.
Especially considering that I spent most of Contenders like sitting in Colorado watching the games and like raging at his terrible Graviton surges and like shouting and being like, why is this guy even on Immortals? Why the fuck are they keeping him so bad? Yeah. And then all of a sudden he shows up in the preseason and he looks like a man reborn. I'm convinced that there's been some body snatching incident with Envy. Actually, he must have been replaced with like an Envy clone or some sort of like Envy replicant.
He's just in the hyperbolic time chamber. That's what they've been doing in that whole off season. That's why he didn't see him. He was just out there practicing.
Imagine being so terrible on off tank that hyped starts in front of you. Like, he has to be one of the most improved.
He is the most improved players. I don't think we could even come up with somebody who is more improved than him, right?
Yeah.
It's got to be him or Boston people, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Dream Casper.
There's another one. Okay.
Yeah.
Right, okay, here's a question for you then. What happens to Valiant when the meta switches?
Oh, I think they'll be fine. They'll be fine. Like, they can always play dive again. Like, if you want to play Genji Tracer dive, you're going to be okay. They have agilities who can play Roadhog if they want to flex into triple tank. Like, I think they're actually going to be pretty good. Also, you'll have the ability to not play Mercy, which was one of their weaknesses, and move on to a more mechanical playmaking support like Lucio or something like that, and that should suit Karib and Unko, who are both way too good to be playing Mercy all the time.
The thing is, I have to say, like, my German senses are tingling about this again, because I think we assume a meta that might actually, like, especially the triple tank thing. The recent changes I assume are going to go live with the Sombra switch, but especially the Reaper one, could potentially have a big impact. And then keep in mind also, the reason we say there's a triple tank meta is because tier 2 of online events happen where these teams with not the same amount of coaching staff, not the level of play, and then also on an online client where characters generally behave very differently happen, and it's sort of assumed that we now play triple or even quad tank.
Yes, so. but that's also what happened. I'm always wary about whenever anyone says like, "Oh, the tanks are coming back," because I remember at the end of 2016, and it was at MLG Vegas, and it was like NIP in Europe running quad tank, and everybody's like, "Quad tank is the best." And meanwhile, I'm sitting in Korea casting Apex and watching all these teams, and like nobody is playing quad tank. And then we show up to MLG Vegas, people try it, they get instantly dumpstered, and it's teams like FaZe and Envy who are not playing. They're playing like dive or other strategies that are end up winning. So I agree with you. I think that part of the problem, like you say, is when you think about the LAN environment, DPS, like the hit scan characters, are a lot better on LAN than they are online. Because of the instant hit registration and the higher tick rate. So it's a lot easier to one-clip somebody as a tracer when you're playing in the Overwatch League than when you're playing on an online server. And also, when you see, one of the things you see with triple tank and quad tank is that it's much easier for bad teams to play that and get wins with it than something as finicky as having a very well-coordinated, high-skill DPS duo dive on supports. So when tier 2 teams do something, it's not only the coaching, it's simply like the ability of the players to communicate with each other and play make, and the caliber of the players that you're talking about, that I still think we're going to see tons of dive. Don't get me wrong. Like, I don't think dive's going anywhere. I think it will be revitalized, but with less Mercy and Resurrection, the value of dive, for the reasons I said earlier in this show, goes up significantly because you can trade one for one again without a Resurrection ruining your day, right? So I'm curious to see what happens. As for the Sombra and Reaper changes that are on PTR, remember that we're probably not going to get that patch for a lot of stage 2. Even if it were to go live, say, next week or the week after, it'll be delayed a couple weeks before it would actually hit the Overwatch League at a minimum. So we have to think about the current patch, which is the Mercy nerf patch, and the Junkrat nerf patch when it comes to what the meta will be like at the start of stage 2.
Okay, so one of the other teams that was just outside a playoff spot, but it was obviously one of the ones that was the least focused upon because it just died immediately. Their chances was Philadelphia Fusion. Now, what is it like? This team seems like another one for me where like they have good parts, but I don't really know that as a team they're that good. So what were the flaws of this team, Yiska?
Probably I mean, it didn't end up being as much of a flaw because he sort of worked around it, especially because they, again, like I said earlier, they have a proportionally much better DPS line than, also because they have 2-star player DPS in their roster, is that their issues in the tank line, especially Fraggy, weren't as exploited because you could just throw in the sacrificial Fraggy. In the meantime, like your DPS would just go ham. Very often, I think, also on the tank line, and then like it would just not matter as much. You would just res him up, okay. And the fun thing actually for me is, especially as someone that has been in the European scene and been at Takeover and talked to these players, is that a player like Leptuno, that was basically the aggro Lucio in Europe, turned out to be a serviceable Mercy for the most part, and also could sort of help.
He's also the aggro Mercy, to be fair. I believe he has 14 more kills on Mercy than the next Mercy player. Like, he uses the res and just like pulls out the blaster and starts like killing everybody. It's pretty funny.
Yeah,
he's secretly trying to get he's been campaigning to get it nerfed the whole time. He was actually the hero we needed but didn't deserve.
Okay.
Okay, because that's the weird thing, right? Because obviously Poco got all this hype during the season, was looking really cool. Do you think that do they have to get another player on this team?
They can't.
Yeah, you can kick people. Can't you just fire them?
I don't think. Well, they still have contracts, so I'm not sure what the actual rules around that would be, because they obviously the contracts can't just be instantly terminated.
You can't just sell it to a contenders squad or something.
Oh, you could probably do that.
Mm. Or you could trade XQC for Sado.
Just trading toxic assets back and forth to each other. And that will create, what happens when you start trading all those toxic assets. It actually creates, the 2008 financial collapse. Yes. And I'm not really interested in the toxic trading that will create the Overwatch League collapse. So,
plus, like, what really even is the trade there? Like, we're trading you someone who does nothing for someone who does way too much in every respect. Someone who does nothing and says nothing for someone who says everything and tries to do everything. So, I don't know who's getting the worst end of that deal, quite frankly. One's got a good ceiling, the other one's got a pretty low floor. I don't know where to go with that one. So, man alive. Right, okay. So, one of the most depressing teams in this league, Monty, because for a while they looked like they were half doing something and maybe they were going to prove me wrong, was the Los Angeles Gladiators. And in the end, just meant fuck all.
I think this team just has like...
the LA Chargers of the LA region, as it were now.
Yes. I think that may be...
Valiant are the Rams, then these are the Chargers.
I honestly don't know, like, what this team is going to do. They have to sign more players. I feel like the ceiling for this team is so low, and they're already at this ceiling. Their supports are great.
The only teams that lost more games was Mayhem and Shanghai Dragons.
I think their supports are great. I think everything about the team, besides the supports and maybe hydration, who's been doing pretty well, they have to start at least getting backup players in to play some of these roles, or someone to challenge for a starting position, because I don't see a world where all of a sudden they're going to get significantly better. Like, where does the improvement come from? The only thing they had really going for them was their support performances and some good teamwork. But they don't. Surefour hasn't been what he was in the early days of Overwatch, where he was a giant playmaker and had the ability to put the team on his back and really carry. Who is the carry on this team? Shaz?
I mean, Asher's had the odd game was decent, right? It's just, again, it's not like he's some star player.
I think, what, you said Asher? Sorry, I missed that.
He had some odd games that were
good. He's been all right. Like, but that's the whole thing, is like, you look at these guys, you're like, like, they're okay.
Yeah. And even that, I think Asher still is one of the more improved players, because I remember in Apex Season 3, he was statistically, and obviously, yes, statistics in Overwatch are flawed to a degree, but he was so far below every other DPS player in the league. And season 3, like, it was basically unarguable that this guy was also not playing well. So that actually was surprising at the least in the beginning of the season for me. That he was actually a pretty serviceable DPS player. Obviously, the problem is if you don't have star player DPS talent, and I'm not sure at this point that Surefour can be that guy again, like he was way back when in C9. I'm not sure where you go from there.
Well, plus, I mean, since they have Bishu, who can speak both English and Korean fluently, if I'm them, I'm just going and looking for some good young Korean player and trying to bang him in the DPS slot. I mean, what else can you do at this point in time, right? They don't seem like a team from the construction that wanted to spend mega bucks and get all the big names. So you got to go for an unknown, probably, right?
The thing is, that's sort of my nightmare that they are actually the one that got Architect or something. And that would
Dude, the architect lottery is going to be super real, by the way. I can't wait to see I haven't heard anything about there being a bidding war, but I am very confident that there will be a bidding war for this guy. He is too good to pass up right now, and too many teams could use a ace level Genji Pharah soldier player. So it should be really interesting to see where Architect goes. And I think a lot of the bottom teams are even going to be bidding for them. Like, you look at where he could land. He's maybe not a bad fit for the Gladiators. He's not a bad fit for San Francisco. He's not a bad fit for the Valiant.
Well, then let's transition it then to talking about San Francisco then, because the difference is, unlike some of these other teams, Philadelphia, a little bit of a mess, obviously. Then we've just talked now, obviously, about the Gladiators team. Unlike them, San Francisco obviously did have the whole time in their back pocket. We've got other players coming. They did win a decent amount of games. They were underwhelming in terms of they lost a lot of the matches, but they would always get maps pretty much. So where do you pin them at this point in time?
Well, we talked to them in ARC last week, and they said that they were most surprised about San Francisco because they're so much better in scrims than they are on stage. And they've been wildly inconsistent. They actually looked pretty good against Seoul, legitimately. I think that was their best series that they've played so far in the Overwatch League. They looked cohesive. I think right now, if just from the outside looking in, it seems like they have problems in comms, because what's so frustrating about San Francisco, you're like, hey, they're doing really well. And then all of a sudden, something bad will happen, or they'll be in overtime, and they just collapse like a house of cards. Something goes wrong when they start panicking, they just completely crumble. So their resistance to pressure and stress seems to be pretty poor. And also, they fucking suck at Horizon. God damn, are they terrible at that map. Holy moly. So bad.
Yeah. No, that on paper, that team should have a bright future, right? That again, if we think about the triple tank meta, if that actually was to happen, that team would probably instantly, because Super and Sinatra coming in, who can play a pretty mean Zarya, if that was part of that thing. Then Dark obviously getting back to Lucio. It feels like on paper all the things are coming now together, and then. I mean, it could be a little bit of an issue that you need to incorporate them into the into the calling structure, whatever. That they need a little bit of time to find themselves, and I'm not sure if they can actually immediately play up on stage 2. These two players, I'm not.
No, they have to wait till March. Their birthdays are both in March, so it'll be I think. I'm not sure if they'll be able to play at the end of stage 2 or the beginning of stage 3.
One player I thought for this team that was pretty underwhelming was Dante. I feel like he's surely one of the players who's immediately going out when you get those.
Oh no, I don't think he's. I don't think he's the biggest problem. No, I actually think he's been improving. I think Nomi is not performing up to the state. I think Baby's been playing great. I think Nomi is an issue. I think Dak has been an issue on the Mercy. This is a team that has been very bad at playing with Mercy. Dak has been constantly dying first. He's an aggressive support player, and this Mercy meta really doesn't suit his style. So I think those are the two I would point out before I'd point out Dante.
Okay. So then what do they do then? Because presumably they're not going to kick Nomi, and do they have a player who's going to play instead of him?
Super, maybe.
He's just going to take his spot?
So Nevix has actually been quite good. So yes. The thing about Super is Super was on LG Evil. He was a main tank. And then he came to San Francisco, and they said he was going to be an off tank, and they got Nevix. But Nevix has actually been playing well. So if I'm San Francisco, I'm pushing Super back to be a main tank and trying to, get him in there instead of Nomi as the starter, because I don't see any reason why you would replace Nevix at this point in time. Like, it doesn't actually help you in any conceivable way.
Were you a fan of Sleepy's play? Wasn't he one of the better players?
Yeah, he's all right. I mean, I don't think he's a world-beating flex support, but I think he's doing his job, and I don't think he's a high priority for competition in his position or replacement.
Isn't that one of the problems in this team? It's got sort of like a bunch of okay players, but not really any like killers.
Baby A has been doing really well.
Okay.
I think on an individual level, you definitely keep him around.
Yes,
but like I said, maybe you get Architect, throw him in there with Baby Bay, see what happens then.
Wade in here, Yiska.
I think the Baby Bay definitely has been a star player for the most part, and also his back has been like he basically if Baby Bay isn't happening, nothing's happening for Shock seemingly, and it's
even
also
on Twitter he got fucking Shaq to reply to it.
yeah.
You're the only other person.
I was the original one to do that. Yeah,
replied to.
He sort of copied my shit there, but yeah, whatever. Fair player.
I think the problem with Baby Babe was that his champion pool was just too stretched. And like he had to play seemingly everything, and he did it serviceable. And then some picks he was obviously pretty good on. But in that sense, it's almost like a problem that Mayhem has, is when one guy needs to play every map, needs to even shot call, I think he does for them. Like, how much can one guy do for you? And obviously, yes, this was planned with Super and Sinatra coming in, and they're probably also going, like, definitely you would have to think of Sinatra as star player potential, and then Super obviously also is considered that, and should have probably also been on the USA team, World Cup team. But yeah, I think they should be having a much better performance. Now, it obviously, like, yes, they look like they will improve a lot, but I think a lot of teams will too. And there's only very few teams where I can point to that won't, at least in some positions, see a more cohesive synergy between them, simply because nobody really liked playing Mercy meta or had a Mercy even prepared. So I don't know. I think Shock should probably wait until the very end of the signing window for some of those spots they need to fill. And maybe, I mean, in terms of main tank, if Super is actually going to be main tank, okay, you said there, but like for them to wait a little bit and see what works out, and also how the tier 2 scene develops and what talent comes up there, seems to me to be the better play for them. I'm not sure.
Okay.
I think this is a team that is really built for the long haul. Like, when you're signing 17-year-old players and waiting for them in the first season to turn of age, like Super and Sinatra, I would just continue to go. That's why I think Architect is a good choice for them, because he's also a very young player who's just turning 18. So, just use this as a season to get experience. You're going to be building for the long term and try and go for better results in the future. So that's what I think. It's just a waiting game, honestly, for San Francisco. I think they have a lot of good pieces to build on, even if their record is not stellar at the moment.
Is it actually known, even in speculation, if some of the runway players are going to come over?
I have not heard anything. It seems like Cox announced today that he was taking a break from the team, but it doesn't seem like that. He at least said it wasn't the result of an Overwatch League signing, and a lot, like, from my angle. So I basically hear the same rumors that everybody else hears. Like, I don't have a lot of inside knowledge about which players have been signed and where they are going myself, because we're just not told that information, obviously, until the contracts are finalized with the league. So I haven't heard of any of the runaway players either. It's not even like I can't say anything about it. It's like I literally have not heard anything about them moving anywhere. And I don't think they would, because if I'm Runaway, like, the reason why we didn't have guys like Stitch in Overwatch League in the first place wasn't because people weren't giving Stitch offers. It was because they wanted to stay together as Runaway. And I think that's smart, because they are going to be the default if somebody else wants to buy. So now there are all these stories coming out now. Hey, we want to have more Asian and European teams. We're expanding Overwatch League for season 2. Well, clearly one of your targets is going to be another Korean team, right? If you're expanding further into Asia, whether it's another Seoul team or Busan team or whoever wants to buy a franchise slot. And where are you going to go? The first team you're going to talk to as the next like Korean team is going to be Runaway, because they're so beloved by the community and they're a fucking world-class team. So like obviously you would like go and see if you could pick them up first. So if I'm runner and I'm sitting there with my team, I'm like, I'm just going to sit in Korea and wait for another Korean expansion, and then I'm going to be the first choice, right? Definitely, so I think in a way it's smart for them to stay together. They're playing the long game a bit, and obviously it's risky because maybe there isn't another owner that wants to purchase a Korean slot. But if you're in that situation, maybe you cave and just go as an entire unit to a different, represent another American city or something like that, like we've seen from
Los Angeles.
A third LA team.
I don't know if you're paying attention to this, Dan Kroenke, but you know where I sort of like dissed your team by saying that your team isn't the Rams of it, even though you own the Rams. Yours isn't the Rams of LA in actual Overwatch. Well, you know what? The thing about the Rams is they've got a lot of talent. They've got a lot of good players, Maybe just buy a good team. Don't try and polish this turd like the Chargers. Buy a good team.
I said that Florida Mayhem, because they're considering that they were the only team that could sign a full new team, should just sign Runaway, right? Just take the 6 players from Runaway, have your half European, half Korean team, start Runaway immediately, and there you go. All of a sudden, you're much better.
And then obviously the Mayhem players like, well, do we still get to play? Well, yeah, someone might be ill. Just stay ready. Just listen. You put on that Korean mask. Don't breathe in anyone else's air. Stay hermetically. You're just the sub. Like we need to bring you out of deep storage, like fucking altered carbon or something, in case we need you to play in a game. Okay, here's the story, Monty, where we always leave this to the end. And this story, it's a sorry tale. It's like some sort of story that some fucking swarthy shipsman would tell in the back of an old tavern over a few too many ales, about the tragic tale of the Dallas Fuel, because here's the thing. Good news, Monty, they had a winning week. Bad news, they almost lost to Shanghai Dragons, and the other win was over the LA Gladiators, who, as I just pointed out, don't count. So, come on. At the end, what is the final summation on Dallas Fuel aside from guilty, death, and life imprisonment or whatever?
I feel terrible for this team because it seems like every week somebody's sick, somebody is suspended. Effect is in Korea. Like they actually haven't even had all their tools available to them throughout the season, so they've been like trying to hold it together with like a few. Basically, they're like playing with a few cards missing from their deck on any given week, and it keeps on changing. So how do you even build a solid core around this? I think AKM is an interesting choice for them. He's not the player I would have gotten if I would have gotten Architect if I was them. AKM's a great player. I just don't know if he's necessarily the fit for that roster because he just started playing Genji like a few weeks ago, and they desperately need a Genji player. He's great at other stuff, though. At least they have a really good Pharah now, and obviously as a secondary hit scan, he's going to be amazing. So I don't know.
Should just get hacksaw plastic surgery to look like a different player and bring him in.
There have been rumors that a Korean tank is also going over because I think the tank, the primary tank position, whether it's been suspended XQC or Coco, obviously has been a position of weakness for them. So there have been rumors. Slasher was tweeting that So What, who's the Lunatic High B team tank, which is weird to me too. Like he's not necessarily the Korean tank I would have selected if he is indeed going to that team. Like he's good, but he's not like amazing or anything like that.
Okay.
Yiska. I think.
Come on.
Sorry.
Come on.
Sorry. I think that team. The problem is, Coco hasn't been serviceable on these other picks. His Winston has looked a little bit better, which it needed to. Most of the time, I'm really not impressed by his Orisa, and you can actually lean on Coco most of the time. On Winston, like if you just look at them trying to dive, or even if they don't dive but have some sort of Winston comp, they are so disjointed. Like if you could have a heat map of where Coco is when he has when he is using Primal Rage, and where his team is, those would be like, basically, here's the sun, here's the earth, right? He's seems to be completely disjointed most of the time from that dive core, which can work if you're keeping threats away, but most of the time he's just feeding a lot of ultimate charge there. So I feel for them, because you should, like, your plan was, we have an aggressive Winston that can help us dive in the sense of XQC. Now, obviously, sometimes things just don't work out between people, and sometimes also you don't really communicate enough what you expect of the player, and then it's sort of like the responsibility of both parties then. But yes, like, if I was to have one pick to instantly improve the team the most, I would definitely pick a Winston player, and it would probably make sense to have a Korean player, because generally, especially for instance in dive teams that are pretty good, like London with when they dive with Profit and Gesture, these two guys have been insane in terms of coordination. Like, these guys make every dry run basically mean we don't lose loop, and we're going to get your support ultimates. And even if you lose support ultimates, we're still killing your Zenyatta. So without really investing too much in there. So if you can now find someone else that can develop that synergy with Effect and can focus backlines, I think that instantly improves the team a lot. Problem is, how do you incorporate language there? I mean, in a sense, and that's also one thing that I thought about when you mentioned Architect for San Francisco. Like, one single Korean in the team seems to be problematic for their mental health almost, right? It takes a very strong character to actually work in these teams, and you almost have to practice your heart out. And for the most part, like, Effect has been trying to will his way to win, and probably did too much in that team. So,
well, even with Effect, you have to remember too that he's not the only Korean around anymore, because they have Violet there, who is the former StarCraft pro and team manager. So it has changed too, that even Dallas has some staff now that can communicate better with Effect.
Because one thing that's a bit depressing about Fuel as well is, like, I know they all obviously had all these big names because they used to be so good in the past in the Western scene, but, like, I thought, like, every time I saw them play, Harry Hook and Chips are going to fine. Those guys are pretty good.
No, those are good. Yeah, Chips,
those guys are.
Chips and
that should
Harry
be the core
are
of a good team, right?
Yeah, I think the meta was, again, not very kind to them. I don't think they ever really figured out how to play the Mercy properly. But then again, like, those guys are so solid in every other meta that we've seen that I don't think you necessarily want to get another support. And they also have Custa to back it up too. So I don't think support is really like a primary issue right now. It's the fact that they literally can't play dive for tank reasons and for lack of a top tier Genji reasons. That I think is their. You're shaking your head. Do you think Seagull is a top tier Genji?
In terms of Genji, I don't know. I think he could be serviceable. The problem is you don't give him much playtime. The thing is, like, as a projectile DPS, I think he looked like one of the better Pharahs when he actually got to play Pharah, which was a freaking miracle that they.
He's a good jump played.
Yeah, actually played Pharah on Iconwald. But the thing is, the problem is that you then thin out your slots. Like, how many players do you want to have in that DPS department? And also, I vehemently disagree to sort of take the word of a former world-class player that has never played Genji, says, oh yeah, I'm going to practice that a lot. Like, the correlation of someone just saying, I will...
He's referring to AKM here,
yes.
Not obviously Seagull.
No, I'm saying that, like, I don't see that thing being fixed. And in terms of supports, I actually have to disagree to a point, because I was actually very underwhelmed that nobody seemed to be able to play an outstanding Zenyatta between three people that could have and did play that role. So obviously, naturally, it should have been Custa, I guess, because he was sort of brought on as the aggressive flex support. then Chip Cyan has historically and for a long, long time been one of the better Mercies.
Wasn't it just mainly Harry Hook that was playing it?
And
they were swapping it around.
Yeah.
Which seems like a waste of his talents, right?
Well, towards the end, he was actually mostly put on Zenyatta, and he actually looked fairly terrible on it. And the problem is, obviously, in that regard, it's almost like an Eska was back in the day, where he was put on a character that he didn't have much time to practice, and also probably his talent doesn't reach into that sort of field. But because of what he brings in terms of intangibles to the team, he was very valuable. And then, like, as soon as they stopped messing around with this Chip Cyan Custer thing, I think they looked a lot better in terms of team coordination, because I think the main problem really on Dallas for the most part was actually communication. Like every smallest bit you see when you get these calls, it was either mute or just all over the place. Effect having a spiritual crisis there. Cool, man, please. Like
that was awful.
It's, I don't know, like, and that's why for them, the core 4 principle stuck again when they all brought these core members in, and it doesn't even matter that they are individually not performing as well. They, as a team, have over the history of Overwatch just shown that they can perform and bring in wins. And if you get a little bit of quiet into that team, and yes, also obviously improve certain positions. I mean, everyone of us thought they would be the best team and potentially contest for the best or for first slot, right? So,
well, I think it's interesting you bring up communication, because for me, their shot calling is somewhat bizarre. So a lot of teams will have their tanks or their supports shot call, right? And you have 2 very vocal players. I know this from like my experience with these guys and watching them play and watching them scrim and talking to this team. Like XQC talks a lot in the game, and he will lead some of these dives. Custa talks a lot in the game, but the thing is, like XQC has been suspended throughout the end of stage 1 now. Custa has been mostly subbed out of this roster. So Taimu is the other one who talks a lot, but Taimu has been in and out of the roster as well. So basically, all 3 of the players that are the most vocal have been like switching around. So like, who is actually leading this team? Because I can tell you, Chips and Harry and Coco are all very quiet players. They're very quiet people, as you know. So they haven't really had a strong, consistent in-game leader to shot call.
Yeah.
Yes.
Another factor I thought as well from watching Overwatch League, and this ties into this, is like that whole thing that a lot of the top Western teams used to think, which is like, oh, we have this guy who's so flexible. He can play like 2 or 3 roles and he can play like 5 different heroes. It's like, that doesn't really do anything in Overwatch League. All that does is you end up using a player who's very good at one thing, at something he's sort of all right at, to cover a flaw you have. Then you go look at the top Korean teams. They're just putting in people who play those heroes, mate, and play that role, and then they're amazing. And you're just sort of like patching up a bleeding wound with a Band-Aid. Like, this will last, right? It's like, do you have to run a marathon? Probably not. The leg's coming off, isn't it?
Well, I think that's the other problem with Dallas.
The gangrenous arm or whatever.
With Dallas is that they've been rewarded in the past for slapping the Band-Aid on the bleeding wound, right? Because they were they have been the only team that is like thrown enough Band-Aids on the gaping hole, and they still make like Apex playoffs. So they still make Apex top 4s, even though everybody's sitting there being like, can you actually fucking fix your fundamental problems? They're like, it's fine.
But what they need now, Monty, is they need some fucking stem cell injection. They need some new talent that's going to grow, that's going to create something new for us here at this point in time. Possibly illegal in that state. I don't know. Don't know the politics at this point in time.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. Yeah, come on, Yiska.
One last thing, because I think it's a crying shame, actually, because from the outside, and I still believe to an extent that this could be true, is that fundamentally XQC as a player and even as a person could slot very well into that roster. And if you were to, and obviously I have no idea what's going on behind the scenes, I think if you could translate to him that he actually is part of that roster and that he could be a fundamental component of one of the rosters that should contend for at least the best Western team.
Yes.
And now we see, that like best Western team is not that far away from best team in the league anymore. Like if you can communicate that to him, and if you find in him that actually matters to him too, and I think you could still work around him. And obviously, Hastra has since gone out and said, no, we're not signing so what. Like, if they actually stick with XQC, I hope they had a good talk where they really, sort of also took a little bit of the pressure of him, because it feels to me like he feels in a situation where it's him against the world. And in many ways it is. Like,
you make this sound like they need a fucking intervention. Like, XQC, we're all here because we love you, man. But why are you hurting us? You know you could do so much. Like, I feel like they need to take this guy to the fucking South American jungles and take ayahuasca with him or something. Be like, heal your spirit, XQC. Let the demon leave you. And then he comes just a changed man. He's like,
when is that going to happen to you, Thorin?
Never, because the problem is the demon has brought me so much material wealth on this base plane that the angel, which he yearns to reach out and embrace higher knowledge, he's the one chained up in the fucking basement, mate. No one knows that Duncan Shields hasn't been seen for about 3 years now. He's just dying on a fucking slow diet of Skrilla in the basement. So don't let anyone know, though. Don't let anyone know that. It's all a secret for now.
I think it's quite apparent. I won't have to tell anybody.
Okay, so the one team we haven't talked about yet, but here's the secret. I haven't done it to make them a one-note joke at the end of the show anymore, Monty. Because first of all, Shanghai Dragons has been winning games. And secondly, they're the team that has this interesting news around them, where they're getting these new players, reportedly, including...
I cannot confirm nor deny that certain players have been signed to the Shanghai
I'm really
Dragons
shocked
roster.
Because when I was attending my most recent meeting of the patriarchal esports secret committee old boys club, to which we all take the toast, no XX chromosomes in this league, apparently they're letting a woman in the league. Now, this is outrageous. Obviously, we all know that women are told from the day they're born, you will never be an Overwatch League player. And they go, what's Overwatch? You go, shut up, none of your business. Now, here's a sewing kit and, I don't know, a casket for your broken dreams. I don't know. Right, okay, here's the thing. Obviously, this is going to be an even weirder team next split, because they're going to have Koreans mixed with Chinese players, and then players that have never played together in any context. But is the only way up for Shanghai Dragons? Like, do you think it actually will help matters if they indeed get those players? Yiska, you actually have to talk now, mate.
Everything helps at this point, doesn't it? Like, I think one thing that I will definitely never do again is underrate people that make it high on the Korean ladder. Because I did that mistake with Jonak, and he obviously ended up being, come on. Like, when Sideshow told me, he's very nuts on stream, and then Reddit comments tell me, no research, you didn't watch his stream. Like, come on, man. I at least want one professional match from that guy, that I can see how he works in the team environment. Now, obviously, we have a little bit more on Gregory, but I'm not even sure if that's how I pronounce the name. But
were they a
Gregory,
team that needed like a tank, flex tank, whatever?
I mean,
yes, flex tank is Shanghai's biggest need. So I can only, I can't confirm or deny that these players are going to Shanghai. So. And as you're saying,
this is a hypothetical, Monty.
This is a hypothetical. This is our imaginary theoretical movement of Korean players to the Shanghai Dragons.
I mean, by the way, just to clarify, I wasn't literally suggesting that has to actually take XQC to the South American jungles and consume ayahuasca either. That was also but a hypothetical scenario.
I think, like Yiska's saying, that's a very good sign how high Gregory is on the ladder right now. But there is a difference in that many of the best Korean players are not currently playing on the Korean ladder, which is something to consider because so many of them are over in North America. Still, though, obviously an impressive feat to be that high up. I do think that flex tank and supports are the biggest needs for Shanghai. Historically in esports, I have not been impressed with the ability of Chinese teams to integrate Korean players into the rosters, as we can see with the rich history of failure to do that in a game called League of Legends. So that worries me. I don't know I don't know whether any of these players speak Chinese. Now, some Korean students do learn Chinese in school, so there's a possibility that some of them may have basic Chinese skills already. But I think at least this is a start for them. I do wonder why they would not get more Chinese players, because we know there are good Chinese players that they could get that would almost certainly have fewer communication issues with the rest of the roster than picking up multiple Korean players and trying to do a 50-50.
This makes me wonder if that Korean coach had some input into this. And he's like, we need a
clearly.
couple of roles. And, he was like, I know some people we can get in, Because I have to say one thing about it, right? Regardless of how they do, it gives a really great storyline for watching Shanghai Dragons next split, as opposed to, can they ever win any fucking games? That's not a great storyline. I'll be watching a few.
Yeah.
What do you think about the Korean players they brought on or are thinking about bringing on? Have been rumored to have said to have been
who else is rumored than Gregory?
Fearless has been rumored.
Oh. Yeah. I actually didn't know that you had the possibility to just get rid of players, and therefore, if you could terminate contracts from players and free up your slots, I would legitimately just directly go to Element Mystic and say, come on over, boys. We're building a team around you. Then, if you have unlimited resources, you obviously put a couple of X6 players in there, probably a Godspeed, probably an Architect. Definitely. So.
Apparently, the other players were Element Mystic, Fearless, and then MVP Space Ado.
Ado's pretty good.
Who's a flex, apparently.
Yeah.
Apparently, there's going to be an unknown Chinese player possibly coming as well, which means nothing. Like a person from China will be fucking. Thanks for narrowing it down. Cool.
I think the biggest question mark around this team is you failed to get Miraculous Youngster the first time. You have a chance to get some players from Miraculous Youngster, or maybe all of them the second time around. Why would you get Korean players when you are a Chinese team that has access to literally every Chinese player? There's no competition for Chinese players. It's not like LPL in League of Legends where there are like 12 teams competing for Chinese talent. You are all of it. You can take whoever the fuck you want. Why would you get any Korean players or players of any other nationality? And guess what? You can also take Taiwanese players. You can take other countries that speak fucking Chinese and instantly slot them into your roster. So why would you do it this way?
That is one thing I'll say. By the way, I think actually the second point's the strongest one, is that you can get players who are basically from Southeast Asia, who obviously don't even have a team, by the way, and don't even actually have any big Overwatch teams, really. That's a very strong point, because for a start off, they're going to speak Mandarin anyway, so cool, they're in. But here's the key part that I think actually might be...
Or Singapore, there's tons of places you could go, right?
The part that I think might be blocking the first part of why they don't just pick up the other really good Chinese players is that, unfortunately, Chinese teams in all games that I've followed, they actually have one of the most sort of restrictive scenarios where you don't see actually a lot of massive transfers of big name players between clubs. They more have that thing where it's like they sign you early and you're just going to play for them forever. And even if you don't play, right, you're on the bench or you're done basically. You go play for a second team or whatever it is. They seem to have more of a thing of you must be loyal to this team and we own you in a mad way. And then they have their own union, ACE, which, as I know only too well from CSGO, if you try breaking those contracts, they will fucking you'll be out. You'll just be out on your ass and you'll be outside looking in, as it were. So it's not as simple as some of the Western scenarios where it's like, we give you enough money, then you join. So it's a tough one. There's a lot of politics over there.
Yeah, politics, but so I was part of a competition where the analysts, all these journalists had make your best out of league Overwatch, best team that's not part of Overwatch League. And despite the other plebs all going for Korean rosters, I actually went with the full Miraculous Youngsters roster, which, by the way, I actually lost due to community vote. And I'm still salty about this. But the problem is with Chinese, there's two problems. One is that seemingly every nuts player is underage and will probably not be 18 this year. So you have like a shy. I tried to research that how old Leaf was, and his Weibo or whatever page said
Weibo,
he was 19. Apparently there was some error there. So if you can't get Leaf, that's already a problem. Then obviously, what's the guy, the soldier player, Yang Fang or Yang. The guy that recently came out and said, "Yeah, I can't resign because I boosted." So
wasn't that late young?
Was that late young? I could have been. Yeah.
That was gangster as fuck that way. He was like, "Yeah, I boosted, so you won't be seeing me." Peace. At least he played it off in a cool way. You know, he wasn't like tearful, like, "Oh, what did I do? Oh shit!" But he was just like, "Fuck y'all."
I don't even understand why you would have to boost, because the figures I keep hearing from Chinese streaming platforms, what these guys are making, you can't, like, if someone is actually proficient at FPS titles and can play PUBG right now, you can't get them over here with money. It's impossible. Like, they are basically shitting on Siegel right now in terms of what they're getting from these streaming platforms. Obviously, all very clean money. And the problem is you can't, like, unless they have the drive to...
Yiska, get us in trouble with the community. Don't get us killed, please. We actually have to go to known places where our physical location is known. And, you know, I don't have bodyguards. I don't know about money. So tread very carefully here.
Yeah, that's basically the problem. And I think the one player that was rumored was Su Fan Jun, which would definitely be an upgrade, by the way. Okay. He was the main support for... Miraculous Youngsters, seemed to also, or was said to do a majority of the shot calling. So if they could actually sign him, that would be pretty sick. And obviously that will also tell you the guy's serious about winning because he's not taking that free money.
Okay. Right. Okay. Let's do this then. To close up the episode, let's make some predictions for the next stage. So here's the thing. Okay. I'm going to ask you, if you have to pick now who the MVP of the next stage would be, but you're not allowed to pick whoever you thought was the MVP of this stage. So it has to be a different person. Who are you going to pick?
Prophet
for the new meta. Who do I think would be particularly good in the new meta?
Like, what are we looking for here? What are you thinking through?
Well, I'm thinking through like dive, a combination of dive and like a possibility of a DPS player who can both dive and switch to like a damage tank if need be, like Zarya or Roadhog, if that's the path that this meta is heading towards.
So who's a good Roadhog then?
I would go with Sabielby because he could play both the Tracer and the Roadhog super well. So I think
and
maybe
he's got that chip on his shoulder from the final.
He's got the chip on his shoulder. Yeah. I'm liking that.
Yeah, not bad. Not least because, he was the captain figure. He let them down. They're like, but why did you betray us, young?
I don't think that was the big problem, but...
Okay. The storyline's better like that. Come on, Yiska. Who you got? You've been trying to think through all your fucking hipster picks for the last 10 seconds. While come on.
No, actually, so
trying to make this Hail Mary.
It's sort of got like a problematic question because I think the answer would be Flatter was the MVP of stage 1. And he will also be the MVP of stage 2. Yes. Now, if I can't pick him, then I go Prophet, despite like him not showing any of his off-tank play if he actually has to, because the guy low key is a nuts carry. Like he's basically the device of Overwatch. Like you probably won't hear like you won't see sick plays like a Pine would.
Okay.
Every single time, but he will get his 2 kills.
It's just the consistency, yeah.
He's amazingly consistent. I remember when I had it twice now, where I'm sitting in voice, and obviously I'm with Baroy, and he updates these stats for us to see, and we see the amount of kills, and I go like, oh, you have to check this again. This is bugged. No, it's not bugged. Guy's just fragging out of his mind.
Okay. I like the analogy because, by the way, for context, the reason why he picked Device is because even though Device at times has been like, contender for best player in the world in CSGO, he's got like a very sort of like passive playing style and he's just very well rounded. He's not a player who's going to like if you watched a frag movie of him, you wouldn't know he was as good as he is. He's not the guy with like, all the fucking 180 kills or like some mad deagle headshots all over the place, but he's just ludicrously consistent. And I think the stats in CSGO was something mental. Like he'd only had like, 2 bad tournaments in like the last 2 years. and I think one of them was when he had like literally some sort of hernia just wrecking his insides. So pretty well-rounded player. Okay, I like the comparison. Okay, what about this then? Now we have to do this. Who next stage will be the most improved player? So here's the gamble here. You don't want to pick someone who's like just almost there now. You probably want to pick someone who like the potential's there, but something would have to change. Therefore, it's epic that they're like the most improved player.
That's hard.
Was there anyone who do you think held down this split? Where
I think it's probably one of the Mercy players.
Yeah. Dak is the name that pops in my mind.
I would say Dak is definitely on the table for this.
And obviously he might be getting better teammates at some point soon. So
Dak's definitely on the table for this. I think a lot of this it's going to be like maybe it's hard to say most improved because I think certain players have had a dip in performance because they've had to play Mercy but have been historically really good, like Jaehong.
Okay.
I think the next best thing actually is if we think that, for instance, Anna is making a comeback and they're playing Moira, which I personally think is actually not that exciting of a character. It's probably fairly similar in terms of how the difference is between very good Mercies and very good Moiras in comparison to the bad ones. But I think Chips High would be one.
So the
I want to take a player though. So I'm shying away from Chips and Jaehong because they have been historically world-class players. So when we talk about improvement, it would be hard to improve better relatively to what they were previously. If anything, we'll just see a return to their old level. But I think Dak is a player that could see a lot of improvement with a meta change. Because he was never a world beater before, but might be able to reach new heights in that regard. I think you have to say Jonak as well, because even though we're seeing some great Zenyatta play from Jonak, he did actually reach the top of the Korean server playing Ana. So at a professional level, we could see him diversify quite a bit and be even better than he is now. Because again, he is a rookie, right? He's a rookie. So anything besides fantastic Zenyatta play, adding more dimension could be considered a major improvement at the professional level.
Okay. Right. Here's the really tricky one, Yiska. Okay. Which player who did really well probably overperformed this stage? See, that's what you call the polite way of like most overrated player, but I made it sound like, you know, sort of like just a frivolous, hey, it's fun, you know, who overperformed a little bit, you know, who was a teensy bit better than they probably should have been.
That's hard. It would probably.
Should we throw some names okay. What are you thinking of? It's useful sometimes if you go through sort of your rationale as you're doing it.
Okay,
he wants to say Jake.
I actually didn't even think about this, but
yeah, you forgot he existed.
No, but I think someone that was super sick for the most part, but probably won't be as good next stage is probably Pine.
Because he just won't play as much, and he was only playing.
Or no, anyway. because the Widowmaker McCree meta enabled him a lot.
Right.
Yeah,
that's true.
But it's very hard to say, actually.
And on this day, hype died. Okay. Yeah, probably true, right? I think they obviously didn't have super duper faith in him anyway.
I think it's Jake, because remember that before Jake found Junkrat, he was a pretty inconsistent DPS player over on LG Evil, and he was in school at the time while that was happening. It's true. So now dedicating it full time. I hope Jake has reached a new level of consistency where he is good, but it is difficult, I think, right now to say with 100% confidence that Jake isn't a top DPS player because Junkrat is extremely powerful. Because the rise of Junkrat and Jake's ability to play that hero came concurrently with the World Cup. Remember, prior to the World Cup and Team USA, he had not been playing in the spotlight for a while because he was on LG Evil and wasn't playing in contenders. So I am not wholly convinced that Jake is at the level without Junkrat that he's playing at right now.
Yeah. And I mean, Jake, as a Junkrat player, has also sort of evolved over the season, because at one point, like I don't know who coined that phrase, but it was like live by the Jake, die by the Jake. He had unprecedented stats in terms of first kills that he scored, and also first death that he conceded. He was like in one match he was at 35 first kills scored, which is insane, and then he was at 25% first death or something. Well, it's just insane. Like
I was talking to Flame about Jake a couple of days ago, and he was saying that he thought that Jake really like embodies the character of Junkrat, because he was talking about an Eichenwald game that happened where Jake like launched himself with a mine into the enemy team, died, and then the passive from Junkrat, the bombs, killed the enemy Mercy. So it ended up being like a good play, but he was like, nobody else would fucking do that. That's insane. Yeah.
But what I was trying to put on is he toned it down. I think he realized that he doesn't need to carry in order for his team to win, and he doesn't. It's not even a problem for him, because realistically, like even though he's been pretty good on Junkrat, like Kumat is a top performer, Muma is a top performer, Linksa is obviously a top performer. He might just be the fourth best player on his team. And you could even talk about if some
Banny's been pretty good.
Especially,
I mean, actually, that is a good point. Even right now, where would we rank Jake on his team? I would say fourth at best, like you're saying.
Yeah.
Arguably worst.
Arguably worse, yeah.
Behind Banny and Rakas.
Which is completely fine, by the way. If your team just does that, like you actually then need to assume that role in your team. And you shouldn't start feeding and trying to make all the sick plays when your win condition is actually to just play a conservative Junkrat, right? So, yeah.
Do you think it's fair to say that Poco overperformed?
For a very brief period of time, yes. I think people became aware of what he was going to do and took better, more cautious positioning when he was in the game. So he hasn't had the same impact out of the first 2 weeks.
Okay. And the last category, you ready? You're going to like this one. So the last one is, let's imagine that we were the character of Mercy and we could resurrect one person's career. Who would you pick? You like that? Not bad? Yeah. You can only have one person. Whose career would you resurrect?
I want Kaiser back. I want Kaiser back a lot.
Okay.
I think Kaiser was so good in the early stages of Apex, and then had a very unfortunate run with C9 in the West. And I would really like to see Kaiser come back. I think he was a really fun player to watch stylistically. He was a top performer for a too brief of a period of time.
Some would say he hit his ceiling, though, Monty.
Yeah, good runaway joke. It wasn't actually him, but yes.
Whatever.
I mean, the meme choice is Arhan. That would be hilarious, I think, if he was to sort of get into an Overwatch League team and actually improve a lot. But I think the sensible answer is Saya player. I mean, you have to define what is dead.
Yes,
but basically,
he's non-existent, but he could be a very good player, right?
Yes, but like basically not being on an Overwatch League team already puts you sort of like on a flat line.
What was the reason for him then why he isn't on an Overwatch team?
I'm actually really surprised he's not.
Because I thought he would be a signing for sure. Or in the mix now. Like, surely this is exactly where someone's like, hey, let's get that guy.
Sure.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah.
No, I don't know. I think Saya player just also coming into the next meta could like if we're actually playing the triple tank again with Soldier backup, there you go, right? Like that's your guy.
I also really would like one of the Quake pros to come back. Like give me Rafa or Cooler or somebody, because I I like the storyline, and I would love to see like the Quake pros really actually be fully invested in Overwatch.
Here's the one I would pick, Monty, of all of them, believe it or not. Because here's the thing, right? Okay, so Cooler, Rafa, these are very cerebral players who have like championship poise. But the player I would actually pick would be Cypher, because basically he had like the best rockets in Quake ever, and he was actually a Pharah player initially. So if you see what Shadowburn does, and how fucking bonkers he is, and how seemingly doesn't even have to have some like insane ability to like communicate. If Cypher could do anything like that, he would be such an exciting player, I guarantee you, because he's just like one of the all-time great talents, like a prodigy in Quake kind of. So that would be my low-key pick. Sadly, it's not going to happen, because I saw him on Twitter the other day, like, fans, suggest to me what game I should try and go pro in next. I tried CSGO and Overwatch. I was like, fucking hell.
Try a little harder in Overwatch. And those guys came in so early, and I feel like people, honestly, with the expansion of Overwatch League, I think those guys should be trying to come back and have another crack at it, because now we know Quake Champions is definitely not going anywhere.
Well, part of the big problem for them was, unfortunately, like here's the thing, with someone like Rafa and obviously the ones that were on Team Liquid, yes, right, those guys actually don't have big egos, and I think they were willing to work at it. It's just that timing was off for them. Obviously, they were starting to get decent towards the very end. The problem for people like Cypher and Cooler is, like, they have spent like 10 years as like, I am the best in this small pool of players. So like, I think for them, when it didn't work out early on and they didn't get the teams they wanted, I don't think they were willing to face the grind of like, I have to start as a nobody and go all the way to, I think that's what kind of, those guys were kind of like, right, it didn't work for me. I didn't get the timing on like the right move or the right team. And so I'm just kind of done now, sadly.
Yeah, that's a bummer. And I think especially as teams are expanding too, you got to tell me, like, if I was a new team owner coming in, I would take a crack at one of those guys, right?
Gamble, right? Yeah.
Well, yeah, exactly. There's such a proven quantity of excellence that at least sign them as like a bench player and just see what the fuck happens, right? I would do that.
That's also where if we were in this scenario where people had contenders teams and you were trying to make it like a farm team, that's who I'd be putting on. And they've got experience, and then if they don't work out, whatever, it's your contenders team.
Yeah.